meeting, our last committee meeting of the year, so we have a lot of loose ends that we wanted to try to tie up, and we have a full agenda with a hard stop at 10 o'clock. So this means that we will try to move quickly, and we will limit the public comment to 3 minutes each. So let's begin with approval of the minutes from October.
I move to approve the minutes from October. Second.
Okay, so we will approve the minutes. And we'll move right into public comment, and I'd like to just start with the first row for public comment, and then we'll move backwards, okay? So we can start with Mr. Burdett.
Sure. Councilmember Green, the first thing is I want to thank you for helping take care of the trees along Linwood Road. And the second thing is I think this is your last meeting. So thank you very much for everything. I do appreciate everything you've done, in particular environmentally within the borough. That being said,
Thank you.
First is I'd like a better understanding as to why the rental registration program, which is specifically listed in the comprehensive plan, has not been implemented since the plan was adopted in 2017, which is 7 years ago. The registration program solves multiple components of the comprehensive plan. First, it protects tenants from landlords who do not maintain an adequate living space for their tenants. Second, it protects residents in and around the borough to ensure there are smoke alarms and a fire extinguisher. Third, the borough collects revenue from the landlords. The perfect example was the fire in Narberth earlier this year, where there were smoke detectors in the rental unit. Did the landlords pay tax on the rental income? How good was all the smoke for the environment? I'm a landlord. Do I have smoke detectors in my rental property? Do I pay the borough on the rental income? Currently, you have no way of knowing. A new tax was implemented for the borough in 2023, and you are now proposing to increase that new tax for 2024. It is not a grace period, it's a new tax. Landlords, of which you do not know how many there are, continue to have a grace period, not the business owners who work and live in the borough. The 1% EIT does not reflect our comprehensive plan, or the rental registration plan certainly does, which would solve several issues. A recent council meeting stated there are 211 municipalities with an EIT, but there are 2,560 municipalities in Pennsylvania. Of the 211 municipalities for the entire state of Pennsylvania, if so, less than 10% of municipalities in our state have an EIT. Of those that do have an EIT, how many give a percentage in their school district? Will Narberth now have the highest net EIT in the state of Pennsylvania? Rather than increase and continue to double tax business owners on their income, why don't you enforce the tax rules already in place? Why respect and endorse EV chargers? You should move the one on Marion Avenue to a more appropriate location and reevaluate this program. First, from my understanding, commercial chargers were installed or to be installed with the permission of the resident whose home you are putting it in front of. Second, if a resident can afford a $53,000 electric vehicle car, which the average price of an EV car, and get up to $7,500 in tax credits, they can afford to use those credits for their own capital improvement in the residential district. Finally, is the Narberth or surrounding fire departments equipped to put out an electric car fire? According to an article in the Wall Street Journal, this appears to be a problem. A gasoline car fire takes about 500 to 1,000 gallons of water to put it out. An EV car can take up to 45,000 gallons. It is sometimes recommended to just let the car burn, but the problem is all the chemicals. A quote from the article about the toxic fumes: make hydrogen cyanide look like PEDs. That comes from a teacher at the Fire Service University and the National Fire Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. We will address the rental registration briefly later in the meeting. And we will follow up with you on the other items, but probably not on this agenda. Okay? So I'm just going to move, if there's public comment, I know we have committee chairs that will speak later.
I'll speak just for public comment since I saw that the EV chargers are a later agenda item. Joe Toscano, 121 Rockland Avenue. I just wanted to say that I've been really, as someone who's very active in using public transportation as well as bicycling, transportation and things like that, we still do have a car, and we have an electric car now, and we've been very grateful and appreciative of having the public charging stations in Narberth. it was definitely a factor that made us more comfortable being able to get one, knowing that we have reliable charging infrastructure in place. It has been really valuable and useful. I think it's even more valuable for those who don't have the ability to install a level 2 charger at their house or don't have a driveway and rely on on-street parking, that they, when they are able to park their car on the street, they can charge it while they're doing that. One thing I'll mention, I have noticed from time to time some cars, internal combustion cars, blocking the chargers. I don't know if there's an enforcement process for that, or what that, if those are to be ticketed or anything, but I have noticed that, and I want to make sure that we don't sort of encourage that going forward, so that those chargers are available to be used for residents. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. We'll go to the second row, which I think is Amy Smith.
Amy Smith, 127 Marion Avenue. I want to thank you for beginning to put together a policy surrounding the commercial EV chargers on residential streets in Narberth. In your policy and any policy, I encourage you to consider equitable access and equitable impact. The north side neighborhood is much denser than the south side, yet there's only one EV charger on the north side, while there are 2 EV chargers installed on the south side. What's more, the Elmwood charger is accessible by a 5-minute walk for most, if not all, south side homes. Ultimately, all residents who want to access an EV charger should have equal access to the stations, and the most accessible location is in the center of Narberth, particularly the municipal lots and commercial avenues. Impact should also be equitable. The onus for this program should not fall on 1 or 2 families. Of all the locations, 125 and 127 Marion Avenue are the only single-family owned home locations for the EV chargers. While our neighbor at 125 Marion asked for this station, we, the other family most directly impacted, strongly feels that this is not the right location for a commercial fueling station. Further, as has been presented to the Borough Council as well as the committee members, there are residents who have volunteered or who have otherwise demonstrated an interest to have the station located on their property, and that willingness to accommodate should be taken into consideration when applying the relocation part of the proposed policy. You might have different views on commercial EV chargers in front of your houses, and you don't need to understand our viewpoint. But we are asking for your respect. Respectfully, please see the impact that this is having on our family and on our street. And can you explain, finally, how 125, 127 Marion Avenue EV charger fits into your relocation policy? And if it doesn't, can you work on a policy that accomplishes this relocation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. And that is an item we'll return to on this agenda.
Rob, I do thank you for returning to it. I also want to let you know Kevin will be here, but I will be going.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so next we have Kevin Tang.
Yep, Kevin Tang, 127 Marion. Thank you everyone for starting the process of creating and implementing a policy for placing the EV charging stations. In reviewing this latest draft, we wanted to note that the location for 125 and 127 Marion Avenue does not seem to meet the initial requirements of location, specifically that the location is expects visiting by the public during normal hours of availability, as there's no park or businesses in the area. If the location meets the criteria of proximity to the SEPTA station, then that also means that essentially all of the south side of Narberth also qualifies. We would also like to note that the 125, 127 Marion location does not meet the requirements for the new site requirements as well. The placement of the station does not seem to comply with the policies, and the installation of said station at the minimum seems arbitrary. In terms of the data for determining if a location is a limited use and utility, what are the criteria for usage? The South Essex charging location only sees about 40% of the usage of the North Essex charging station when looking at the same time period when both stations are operational. If there is a limited number of chargers to be deployed for Narberth, then we think that the chargers should be placed in areas that maximize usage and impact for the entire community. We again want to thank the committee and the council for starting the process, and we look forward to continuing to work with you to find an equitable and amenable solution for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so I think then we move to the back row. Mr. Schoenhardt?
Yes, good morning, everybody. David Schoenhardt, 131 Marion Avenue. So we are the property that is adjacent to the two properties that have been mentioned here. We're at 131 Marion Avenue. Several things very quickly within the 3 minutes. One is that the location of the charger indirectly affects us quite significantly just because of the nature of the geometry of our street and of our property. We have a fire hydrant in front of our house that limits access to our parking already. Then the driveway that we have is a shared driveway, so that we don't really park in the driveway. We come and deliver and go back out. So we have to park out on the front street. Then with the charging stations there, that takes 2 more spots out of the mix. We also have a neighbor that tends to pull their car down a little bit too close to the fire hydrant, so then we can't park our car there. So just the reality of the situation is, we've been struggling this ever since we've been moving into the house, is that there's only so many spots out on the street. And now we've lost 2 of those spots, so that's difficult. The other issue that I have is in terms of it's indirectly a safety issue, but it's really more of a policy issue that indirectly affects safety, which is, what do you want people to do while they're sitting there, while they're charging their cars? Is it appropriate that they just sit there? Sometimes folks will go for a walk, I'm sure. Other times they're going to sit there and they're going to surf on their phone. They're probably going to try to tap into our Wi-Fi. And also they're just going to sit there and kind of watch our houses. I mean, they have nothing else to do. I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's appropriate. The charging stations are in public areas for a variety of safety reasons, in addition to the policy issue, which is, go use your free time while you're in town. And go have dinner, go have a beer, go do something, go shopping. Also, I think it's important that you have a policy that the cars cannot be left there overnight. Otherwise, someone will come in at 10 o'clock, they'll charge their car, and obviously they know they can leave it there overnight, and then that takes those 2 car spots out of the mix. So just the jockeying for an electrical charging spot is difficult. I also think it's important that you have a policy for those individuals that do want to have a private charging location in a residential district, that there is some way by which they are able to set up an extension cord. They're able to put their charging station somewhere out near the front end of their property, so that between it and an extension cord, you can get out to your car. I think that actually in a residential district is the really important issue, and one that I brought up with Michelle, goodness sakes, 10 years ago, before this whole issue ever started up, which is, we need a policy in terms of how individuals can charge their car. So that's it, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, David. Yeah, we will return to many of those points. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so then in the back row, public comment. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Good morning, my name is David Frankenfield. I am a homeowner living at 103 Marion Avenue. I've come to today's meeting to voice my support for the EV charger recently installed on Marion Avenue. Everyone here is aware of the need to transition to EVs, primarily to combat climate change, but also to pursue other public goods, such as reducing air pollution and increasing energy efficiency. I believe our street is an ideal location for a public EV charger, where many homes lack driveways, leaving homeowners unable to install their own. Even for those with driveways, the availability of a conveniently located public charger will speed adoption of EVs by removing the barrier of installing expensive home electrical upgrades. In fact, when my wife and I were considering our next vehicle purchase, knowing there was a charger just a few houses down made the case to go EV significantly more compelling. I understand there's been opposition voiced by some of my neighbors, questioning both the merits of placing the charger on Marion Avenue, as well as the process the borough followed in notifying affected homeowners. While I join them in urging the council to follow appropriate notification protocols and keep all residents on the street informed, I find their arguments against the location of the EV charger on our street unpersuasive. First, it is very difficult to imagine that a charger taking as many as 6 hours to fully charge an EV battery would meaningfully increase traffic or attract strangers into the community. The lengthy time required to charge all but ensures that the charger will be used primarily, if not exclusively, by those living within walking distance. Second, as someone who drives down the street daily, I can personally attest that parking in that area of the street would not be materially affected by the loss of the 2 spaces taken up by the charger, since there are almost always ample spaces adjacent to or on the other side of the street. Third, the argument that the presence of the charger will diminish home values is unsupported by available studies, which instead show the opposite, matching the intuition that the chargers would be seen by most prospective home purchasers as a shared community amenity. These readily ascertainable conclusions lead me to wonder whether the motivations underlying this opposition are driven more by the personal preferences of its most vocal advocates, rather than the purported concern for neighborhood-wide impacts. Keeping that in mind, I would like to remind the council that your ultimate duty is to serve the interests of the Narberth community as a whole, which I am certain will benefit tremendously from the continued presence of the EV chargers on our streets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Artie. I also have a statement prepared. I co-own 103 Marion Avenue. I'm here today to communicate my views on the matter of the EV charger located on my street. The loudest voices tend to drown out other perspectives regardless of the truth or popularity of their position. I may not have the loudest voice, but it has become abundantly clear to me that I must voice my support for improving public infrastructure in Narberth, particularly the recent installation of the EV charger on Marion Avenue. I believe the council has the right, and in fact, the obligation to improve this public infrastructure. The charger is located at an ideal midpoint, accessible to residents who are unable to add a charger in their own home. I encourage everyone to consider the issue at hand rather than continuing to delay the activation of the charger on procedural grounds. I believe the installation of the charger in appropriate residential areas and commercial areas will encourage EV adoption and reduce air pollution over time. In fact, my husband and I considered acquiring an EV after learning about the EV program in Narberth. I'll end with this. Rather than allowing the loudest voices to get their way, I urge the council to keep the public interest at the forefront.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any further public comment online?
Yeah, go ahead, iPhone.
Good morning, it's Carol Marie Scanlon. So I have a comment about the EV stations. I vehemently do not believe that public taxpayer-funded EV chargers should be in residential areas, and they should be in the commercial areas because we want to support our business district. Residents that have EV cars should be responsible for installing their own charging stations. Even if you don't have a driveway, other Narberth residents have installed the EV chargers. Now, according to your draft policy, and in light that there never has been a policy or standard for placing these EV stations in front of people's homes, the charger at 125, 127 should be removed and placed at a more appropriate spot, as in your draft policy, like a multi-unit dwelling, the Narberth SEPTA station, trails or bike routes to recreational areas, a park, athletic field, school, library, community meeting places, or business district. Your point 2A excludes in the multi-use dwelling section individually owned townhouses, row houses, and mobile homes. This also should mean not placing it in front of individually owned homes. Actually, it seems that the only reason this charger is where it is because former councilperson Michelle Panopoulos in initial discussion said something like, sure, place it in front of my house, when you were discussing placing EV stations after the Harveys on Marion Avenue vehemently opposed the one that was placed in front of their house and they had it removed. So realistically, the only next step for that charger in front of 125, 127 Marion is to remove it because it does not meet the criteria. And the neighbors at 127 where it's placed don't want it. It was placed randomly without their knowledge, without their permission. So how do you get it removed? It does not meet your criteria. at the minimum. Since there are people on the block who want it, move it to their place. The people at 127 do not want it. It was placed without their permission, without their knowledge, without anything. Just, get home from work and there it is. Put it where it's wanted. Take it out from where it's not wanted. How are you going to remove this? How are you going to resolve this? Because it doesn't meet your criteria. How are you going to get it moved? What are you going to do with it?
Okay, thank you, Carol Marie. We will follow up later in the agenda. Are there other public comments? No. Okay, so we will close public comment. Thank you, everyone, for coming to share your feedback. We do listen to what you're saying. But we have many interests that we're trying to balance. So we will take it all into consideration. All right, we're going to move on now to item 3 in the agenda with the EAC update. I've invited our 2 committee chairs, Joe Toscano from the EAC and Rebecca Starr from the Police Advisory Committee. And these are the 2 committees that support public health and safety. They're kind of the research arms, for the committee, so that we can have really informed discussion around policy choices. And I first want to just thank both Joe and Rebecca for your role as chairs and for serving in these committees, which are still fairly new, part of our governance structure. And it's a key part of how we've kind of redefined this committee beyond just public safety to public health and safety. And I think that broader conception has allowed us to think about both traffic calming, crime and police concerns, but also climate change, all kind of under one umbrella. So I think it's been productive for the committee. So I want to start by asking Joe Toscano if you could just kind of walk us through, because there are 5 memos that have come from your committee to our committee as recommendations. And given the staff transitions over the last several months, I didn't want to lose track of any of the good research that your committee has done. And so I was hoping that you might be able to offer kind of a 1-minute capsule summary of each memo so that we could keep this work on the radar looking ahead into next year.
Sure thing. Thanks, Rob. And I want to also say, just acknowledge the other members of the EAC who helped, put these memos together and all the research that we've been doing. It really is a team effort, and I'm really grateful to the other EAC members for each of these 5 points. I'll try and be very brief, and if you guys have questions about any of these items, I'm happy to discuss them further, but I'll just try and give bullet point summaries of each of them just to orient us all to where we are with these 5 memos that the EAC has sent to public health and safety over the past year and a half. So the first memo there talks about the Green Fund. This was a proposal that was originally conceived of as a way of funding a lot of the initiatives that we're interested in developing through the Dartmouth Climate Action Plan. So this is meant to be a revolving fund that will maintain its balance from year to year, and it can be used for a variety of purposes to support the goals of the Climate Action Plan. So it could be used for energy efficiency projects, it could be used as rebates for residents who are switching to renewable energy for their water heater or for their home heating. Incentives for selecting a renewable electricity supplier, for example. It's open-ended as to what it could be used for, because there's many different strategies that are outlined in the Climate Action Plan. The way the fund is meant to be funded is a couple of different mechanisms we suggested, possibly using energy savings from switching to the LED streetlights. We saved quite a bit in our electricity costs by doing that. That would be a potential source of funds. And also the carbon pricing system, which we'll talk about in a moment. So that's what the Green Fund is. I I saw that it was in the budget from 2023. I don't know where it stands in the budget for 2024, but that's what the green fund's all about. Do you want, it's up to you.
Yeah, maybe we
Absolutely.
could pause for a question from the committee after each. Yeah,
Jeff, thank you so much for being here. And with this being Rob's last meeting, I mean, he has been the force behind this. So I just don't want the details to get lost after you have to go.
okay.
Fungi, Friends of Narberth Green Initiatives, is a new initiative. How do you see the Green Fund kind of working to enhance or partner in different ways with the newly established fungi?
That's actually a great question. We were just talking about that at the EEC meeting on Wednesday. I think fungi they're working to establish a process whereby those funds could be used for these different projects that the borough has. I don't know enough about the mechanics of how funds get transferred from one entity to the other, but I see that the funds that fungi will raise and have access to as serving the same purpose as what's in the green fund.
Yeah, so it's really kind of a public-private. So we probably should, between this committee and finance and F&A, fungi and the EIC really, and the office most importantly, really kind of delineate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goals of both sets of funds are similar, right? But how the actual mechanics of how they get transferred and used, I don't know what the best approach is.
The way I see it is the fungi structure allows for us to receive private donations.
Right.
And so, whereas the Green Fund is publicly funded.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, so when you say things like incentives for homeowners and whatnot, I mean, that may easily be shifted more to fungi.
Yep.
So the government and the office isn't kind of giving rebates to individual families, but rather this non-profit arm.
And if they have the capacity to do that, that would be great. I mean, I don't know what the role of borough staff is with fungi and being able to administer a program like that. I think that's a critical question.
Low. I mean, it has its own board.
So yeah, so
partner,
to the extent that they have the capacity to do that, I think that would be a great use of those funds.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Other questions about the Green Fund? If you guys have questions at the end.
Is it, so do you see that it's somewhat self-funding with the, you said there was some LED savings, energy savings, or?
That was one of the things, that was one of the big ticket items that was, happening when we were doing this, and there was a pretty big cost savings from the electricity usage by switching to LED streetlights. And so we saw that as a potential initial source of funds for the Green Fund. I think the other big source is what I'm going to talk about next, which is the carbon pricing system and how that could be used to contribute to it too. Okay, so moving on to the carbon pricing system. This is a system that's already in place. This was adopted by council, I believe. I forget the exact date. The memo here concerns updating what the actual carbon price is that's used by the borough. So just to give some additional background, carbon pricing is a system by which you account for the future costs that are associated with generating new emissions now. And those costs are computed using a variety of factors. They can include things like the future costs of doing climate mitigation efforts, agricultural effects, health effects. It's very broadly defined. And what a carbon price does is tries to say, in 2023 dollars, this is if we emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide now, this is the future cost that's going to have to our environment. And so what Narberth has is an internal carbon pricing system so that for any municipal operations that are going to lead to new emissions, for example, a new internal combustion vehicle, a new natural gas boiler, we compute the carbon price associated with the lifetime emissions of that piece of equipment, and that money has to be used to offset it in some way via, for example, supporting a renewable energy project. Right now, the carbon price is set at $100 per ton. The EAC recommended raising that to $190 per ton based on more recent research that came out since we adopted this approach. Just last month, the EPA chose that as their target number, and I haven't actually had time to go through the full EPA report, which I'm going to do, but just skimming it and looking at some of the news articles about it, they settled on that $190 per ton of carbon dioxide pricing amount. And so the memo there was really to recommend that we change from the current $100 per ton to $190 per ton when computing those emissions. I would also add that the EAC is available to help borough staff in calculating these whenever these kinds of things come up. There aren't too many of these kinds of things. It's vehicle purchases and, big equipment purchases for the buildings and things like that. But when it does come up, we're available to help calculate what the emissions are associated with and what the carbon price would be for that.
Mhm. And so just to give an example, under Manager Bryant, this practice began.
Yep.
And so when it came time to make a purchase, I forget what it was exactly.
It was
A vehicle?
a vehicle, I'm forgetting what the vehicle was when she was purchased.
But there was a computation made,
Yes.
for the carbon tax, and it came out to maybe $3,000-4,000. And that accounts for the lifetime emissions. And that money was then put into the green fund. That was the concept, that then that would go into the green fund.
Yeah.
And, again, we've been in this staff transition, so we were just kind of getting that off the ground with Samantha.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I wanted to ask Joe to come to kind of revisit, the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk with you guys at any time.
Just to be clear and to totally understand it, it's on purchases by the borough? By the borough, not by anybody else?
Yeah, just by the borough.
Correct.
And it gives us a more accurate price comparison if we're comparing, for example, a combustion vehicle to an electric vehicle, and the electric vehicle has a higher sticker price. But then we add
To understand other costs.
Yes.
to
So it's like cost of
understand
the environment.
the cost of the environment.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But
So
actually,
that's exactly the goal.
your question highlights the difference between the green fund and fungi. So when the borough does that, we can tax ourselves and pay into the green fund.
Right.
If I were to buy a gas car, I could pay into fungi,
Yes.
right? Like I
Exactly.
couldn't pay the staff.
Exactly.
Borough, but there would be a place, a pot for me or for our family
Exactly.
That's
to
a great
tax
point.
ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great
So
point.
that could be a guide or a suggestion if people want to consider that, when on their personal thing, that would be a nice informational item for people to do.
Absolutely, and I think as
Sorry, no, I mean,
No. as these things develop, I think we need to do another, PSA campaign to let households.
Yeah, a campaign, but as far as government is concerned, this is just for our purposes.
Well, and
Gotcha.
also, it's just worth noting, the Times has been reporting on all of these carbon offset programs that are notoriously difficult to actually track. Are they, if you're paying extra, maybe a $50 carbon offset for your flight to California because you want to do right by the environment, where's that money actually going? Is it planting trees? It's almost impossible to track. And so one alternative at the local level is to institute, say, a voluntary carbon offset donation that a family could make when they make a family vacation to Arizona.
Okay.
And that goes into fungi, and then that money, we can track it because it can be spent on trees in arbor or parks or,
Right.
And
So-
that is tax deductible as well, or?
It will be, your fungi. Yeah.
And I would say that the EEC would be happy to work with fungi to come up with some simple tools that residents could use to make those calculations based on the carbon pricing amount that the borough thinks is appropriate.
Great.
So I think that's a great idea. Next?
Next.
Okay. I know there's a lot of these. I'll try and go a little faster here. Community choice aggregation. So this is one I would say I'm very excited about the prospects for this. So community choice aggregation is a process by which the borough could potentially become the default electricity supplier. Just like right now, the default electricity supplier is PECO's choice of energy mix. Community choice aggregation is a mechanism by which the borough could become the default supplier. People could still choose whichever other electricity suppliers they would like, just like they can now. It's just rather than PECO being the default, the borough would be the default. And by collaborating with other boroughs, there are now I think 5 boroughs who are supporting this effort. We can leverage our power to get better power purchase agreements and better rates than people will be able to get on the individual retail electricity markets. And what that can allow us to do is to negotiate, for example, for 100% renewable electricity purchases for the borough. So we've been working with several other boroughs on this. Narberth was the first to sign a MOU to pursue this process. Media, Swarthmore, Lansdowne, and I think one other borough that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, have all signed on now. We're working with a group called Jewel, who's been successful at creating these programs in New York State, and they're interested in doing this in Pennsylvania. The reason we're working with boroughs in particular is that the borough code allows boroughs to operate their own municipal electric utilities or to be electric suppliers. And several other boroughs already do that in Pennsylvania. And so this is a way we can sort of get the boroughs together and use sort of the combined population that we all have together to negotiate better rates on electricity purchases. And so the goal will be to offer a rate that's similar or lower than what PECO's default rate is. And again, people can opt out if they want, but this is what we see as really the only feasible way to meet our goal of 100% renewable electricity by 2030 would be to do something like this where we can choose that the default supply will be renewable, and most people will likely, we would think, want to stick with that for no other reason than just for cost. They might not want to pay more. So where that's at right now is Jewel and the boroughs are having discussions with PECO that have been going well, and with the Public Utilities Commission, which have also been going well, and we're just kind of in the middle of that process right now.
And just to confirm, there's an RFP and there's a contract, but outside of that, there is no additional burden onto borough staff.
Correct. Yeah, Jewel would be the administrator of this. And all the billing and management of the utility lines and everything, that continues to be through PECO, just like it is now. Like if you choose, for example, the energy co-op as your electricity supplier, you still get your bill from PECO. PECO still handles outages and things like that. That would all remain the same. Jewel would just handle the purchasing of the electricity on behalf of the residents. And the way they make money would be part of the contract. Like some percentage of it would go to them to fund their operations.
Thank you for your work and all this research and coordination with the other boroughs as well.
Yeah, no, the CCA is a tremendous project. I mean, it's just involved countless hours of work on the part of the AAC, and Narberth has really taken the lead. And because of that, other boroughs have been inspired to join, boroughs that were at first skeptical. And, you know, we've kind of reached that critical number of households where it becomes cost effective to move forward with the project. And like you say, there's always the opt-out, you know, so no one is forced, you know, to accept this particular, electric plan, but it would become the default, which, you know, has become very clear. It's so labor intensive to go door to door to get every household to make the switch to renewable electricity. We actually have tried to do that, but if we are, you know, really trying to meet our 2030 goal, the CCA is essential, and the council has supported it. And I think at some point in 2024, the hope is that there would be a contract for the council and the staff to consider.
Yeah, that's the time frame that I think we're aiming for.
Practically speaking, does that mean for residents, is this going to happen for them automatically, or is there something that all of the residents will need to do?
It will happen automatically. We'll need to communicate with them, you know, send out letters, letting them know this is happening, and do some public outreach. But there won't be anything they would need to do on their part unless they want to opt out.
Right.
In which case, there'll be probably a system where they'll go online, for example, and say, I would like to opt out. But if they're happy to opt in, then they won't need to do anything.
I really hope that we have this before us in 2024.
I do too. I'm pretty hopeful of it, given the progress that's been made. PECO has had good conversations with Jewel about what they would need to make this happen, and that's been very positive from what I understand. And the Public Utility Commission is meeting with Miriam Shakow, and who's on the EAC, and a member of Swarthmore's EAC, I believe, next Thursday in Harrisburg to discuss this with them and with Jewel. So.
Just a technical question. If you say have automatic payments set up to PICO, would you need to change that?
Nope.
You wouldn't even have to change that?
Anything.
Okay.
If anyone who's ever chosen a different supplier other than the PICO default, you'll notice that all you see is on your PICO bill, it just has a different name for the supplier.
Okay.
Nothing else changes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also just want to note that it was under Manager West that the borough went all renewable with borough electricity.
Yes.
So, all of the public operations are 100% renewable electric, and a key part of the climate action plan is then to do the same within the whole community, among residents.
Yep.
And this is the answer.
Yep.
I mean, that would be a tremendous impact for greenhouse gas emissions.
It would be huge, yes.
As just a minor side note, I'd like to acknowledge Manager West was also instrumental in getting our lighting changed.
That's exactly
I
right.
was gonna say that.
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
The street lights.
Yes. Matt, I remember fondly you saying, look at the difference between the cool and warm light, and me standing there saying, I believe you, there's a difference, I just can't see it.
All right, briefly, Joe, if you don't mind, the last two items.
Last two items, these are memos regarding, first, switching to a brining approach for road salt treatment. This is a more environmentally friendly approach than using rock salt. Our Director of Public Works is supportive of this. Villanova and the Lower Merion Conservancy recently got a grant to study this, and I'm on that, I'm an investigator on that grant also. The goal will be a switch for next winter season. I don't think it's feasible to switch for this season. And in fact, as part of that project, we're going to be studying the salt impact on the streams in Narberth, and monitoring that to show that brining can have an impact on reducing the salt intake into the streams. After we switch to that, through part of this project, there's training available to public works and borough staff if they would like it, on best practices for this. And so we're just recommending that the borough continue to support that project and switch to that for next year.
Isn't brining salt?
It is, but it's a lower concentration. Similar effectiveness for de-icing, but a lower concentration that goes into the streams.
Okay.
So it is still salt, yes.
Yeah.
No salt is the best, but you don't want to have,
chicken and it's salt.
you don't want to have icy roads. So if you're going to do something, it's the best thing to do.
I see.
Yeah.
Is it more pet friendly?
I don't know the answer. They're mostly looking at aquatic life in the streams. But I would imagine, I mean, it's a lower concentration, so to the extent that pets are affected by the rock salt, I would imagine that it would be better for them also.
Great.
But I don't know about that particular one.
If I could jump in here too.
Yeah.
To follow up with my conversation with council last evening about the capital plan that I've been developing with staff, one of the things that, or I should not say one of the things, the thing that the capital plan will be based on is a master inventory list of all capital projects. And in coordination and talking with Jeff Eldon, he brought this road brining up as through that process, and it is included on that master inventory list. And so that you'll see that coming in when we discuss the capital improvement plan with council in the new year.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. Okay, so the last
item is a memo proposing a composting program. So we were pretty inspired by Media Borough's successful composting program. They started a pilot program for residential composting in 2018, I believe, and it was so successful they now have a borough-wide composting program in place. We would love to see something similar in Narberth, so that memo proposes a pilot program for starting with just 25 households, partnering with Mother Compost. Public Works would pick up the 5-gallon buckets from the resident's house. They don't even need to take it anywhere. Bring it to a central place in the municipal lot, and then Mother Compost would pick up from the municipal lot to take it to the composting site. There's lots more details in the memo. The The total cost is $1,254. I think it's a great bargain for getting a pilot composting program in place. And I also wanted to mention that I think it's valuable to consider this now in light of the recent trash and recycling contract and the costs associated with that. If we can reduce our solid waste, that could potentially lead to reductions in the cost of those contracts in the future. Of course, there'll be a cost associated with the composting, but we could sort of estimate if there'd be a net savings from that. But regardless, from an environmental perspective, it would be huge to get this composting program in place.
Quick question. So you said Public Works would be picking up and then bringing it to a central location for the pilot program. If it was eventually scaled to the whole borough, how do you see that working? Because that seems like not realistic for.
Right. We would either have to switch then to doing curbside pickups where like one of the compost just goes around the borough, picks it all up themselves and then just takes it. Or we would, I don't know, I think we'd have to have more discussions with Public Works about other alternatives in there. There's a few other alternative options we considered for the pilot program that maybe have some insights into that are in the memo. We thought this was the best thing to start with for the pilot. But that's a good question. We'd have to figure out how to sort of scale it up, assuming the pilot is successful.
I've also heard that there were grants available for subsidizing a program like this, maybe in the future, that other boroughs have done.
I'll look into that.
Yeah, I talked to the owner of Mother Compost, and she said there were
okay.
available.
Great.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. I know that's a lot, but it's a lot of the work of the AC and the work of this committee going forward. Okay, so we don't have much time. I do want to keep moving forward. We have the fire report filed. I wanted to go to item 5. The police report is filed, but I wanted to ask John Chiefstring if you could speak briefly to the kind of revised traffic complaint procedure, just for everyone's benefit.
So currently, what we've been operating under is when we receive a complaint from a resident, depending on the nature of it, we provide a response. A lot of times that's an investigative nature. So if it's a speeding complaint, Public Works will set up the counters and the speed signs, and we'll normally leave them out there for 3 to 4 weeks so we can get a good analysis of what's going on. And based on that, make an interpretation as to whether or not we see any indications of a problem, respond back to the resident. In times of where there is an issue, we can either deploy resources, through the police force to go out and, enforce stop signs, whatever the case may be, or if it's a larger issue, present it to the committee. I think that the one indication that we've been working with is that if we get a complaint from 3 residents, that, we do that in this investigation, but also gets forwarded up to the committee for review at that point as well. Mm-hmm. So, and then, with that background information as to what we've found.
So I just want to report back that just in the last few weeks, I have been hearing that the process has been working so much better because of your role at the front end, rather than the complaints coming, from residents directly to this committee. I think it's better that we lean on your expertise to kind of first vet these complaints and then funnel things. And this was Alan's concept too, to restructure the process that way. So I see it as working really well. So I want to thank you for that. It can always be tweaked. And thank Alan for that concept.
Yeah. And it really kind of underscores your dual position of like Chief and Director of Public Health and Safety, because sometimes, as we've seen, there's not a legal standard for speed, right? So people are going at 25, so there's nothing you could do from the law enforcement. However, we know that it feels too fast and unsafe on those streets, and I feel like that's when it almost shifts over to you, Jeff, Public Works, saying, how can we use infrastructure as street calming? And that's not something that council should be involved in.
Right.
It's something that.
Also, I think the residents really appreciate that there's a clear policy and process for traffic complaints, and I think that's a win for everyone.
Yeah. Coming here, it's not the right spot.
Yeah. And, for many months or even years, it was really bogging down the work of this committee. And this seems like a much more efficient process. So I'm very happy about that. I also just wanted to ask Jeff if you could speak briefly to the hedges and, you know, the trimming of hedges at dangerous intersections. Do you feel that that's kind of resolved at this point?
So we took care of the one complaint that we had gotten over at Woodside and Woodwood, because it turns out while the borough does not have a right of way out there, you know, when PennDOT replaced that section of bridge there, we technically are responsible for those sidewalks. So that gifted us the power to trim there. Everything else now, since our new ordinance was passed, you know, for the curb and sidewalk maintenance, you know, that now allows our code enforcement to issue citations or violations to these homeowners. So now that we have that, we can effectively go intersection to intersection and, you know, just ensure that people can see when they're coming to the intersection.
Okay, and then this is a big breakthrough because this was not happening before.
I mean, essentially, this is so efficient because we're getting out of your way. I mean, there's no reason why council should be involved in this, and we should just let you all do your jobs.
Yeah, so now that we have that, I've been speaking with Kev Walsh, you know, from our code enforcement, that him and I are just gonna set it up sometime and just drive the borough.
Awesome.
You know, in a truck, in a car, and, you know, sit, you know, because obviously when I drive around in our trucks, you know, I sit higher, I can see, but he has a smaller SUV, so we'll use his car to gauge, you know, the sight lines as well.
Brilliant.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
Very helpful.
Okay, so next I wanted to invite the chair of the Police Advisory Committee, Rebecca Starr, to summarize the memo that you had sent us actually months ago. And I apologize, we weren't able to get to it really because we had to cancel a couple of meetings, we had staff transitions. So we wanted to address that memo, which is, I think, very thoughtful and important. It came to us after the house fire. And the subject is emergency communication plans. So I thought Rebecca, if you could say a few words and then we could ask our chief to respond.
Sure, so as you said, this came up, one of our meetings was as the house fire was still being put out. And our subsequent meeting was during the environmental alerts from the smoke alerts from the wildfires in Canada. First of all, let me just say, I appreciate your patience with us. This is our first memo to to the committee. And so I do appreciate both discussing it with you, but also hearing feedback on how to make the process more helpful, even going forward. So it's a very general recommendation at this point. When we looked into this briefly, currently the emergency communication is our understanding is all handled through Everbridge. For whatever reason, that name does not stick in my head. And there are just over 2,000 people signed up for Narberth alerts, but we're not able to determine from that number how many households in Narberth or how many even residents of Narberth are actually covered by that communication system. Furthermore, even since we've submitted this memo, anecdotally, there are very involved residents of Narberth who weren't aware of the need to sign up for that. Yes?
Myself included. The first time I've heard of Everbridge was your memo. Where did folks learn about this, may I ask?
I have no idea. Right? I do know that there was at some point in the weekly newsletter that it was sent out from that. But beyond that, that's the only place that I found out.
It did come up in meetings several times during.
I remember her saying it was aspiration. I never knew how to sign up for that.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So that I got it through that, and I was like, oh look, I can get alerts from Lower Merion and from Narberth, and so I signed up for it. in communication here, if you don't mind me using it as an example, very involved, obviously, a community member, didn't know about it. So, first and foremost, even if that is our entire communication plan, we need PSAs, we need to figure out how to get people signed up. Beyond that, and this is why this is still a very general plan, let's say that is how we want to communicate. There's no, our understanding is at this point, there's no specific protocol for who's the one that's making the determination, what alerts are getting sent out, how are they getting transmitted, and that goes hand in hand with a lot of the communication that happens is both official and unofficial through social media. And that is, the gossip side of it is ineffective. But there is room for there to be sort of an official word coming out, like who is the person that's sending out through the police page, through the Narberth Borough page, through other social media channels. So we really think that Borough Council needs to take a greater look and develop a more comprehensive and very specific emergency communication plan.
Thank you. Yeah, I found it very compelling. I wanted to hear the chief's response.
So just for background, Everbridge is supported through Montgomery County, so that's what they use countywide. And to Rebecca's point, we can't tell who is signing up for Narberth alerts because anybody in the county can sign up. So maybe somebody that works here, or somebody that lives nearby and wants to get alerts. So that's the kind of drawback there. Obviously, we use Facebook and the newsletter to communicate currently. As far as who puts out the Everbridge alerts currently, borough managerial staff and myself have access to the county system to put it out. We can obviously speak to maybe developing a communications plan within the borough to, address what rises to the level of an Everbridge alert. Currently, it's just kind of, I think at the wildfires, we had a discussion and decided what we were going to put out, but maybe formalize that a little bit more. But to everyone's point, I think that maybe the best option would be to be a little more proactive in allowing or alerting residents that this is an option. And in my memo to the committee, talked about a couple of things about maybe readdressing it in the newsletter, creating a page on the borough website called Stay Informed and provide links for all of these options, to make sure they're signed up for the newsletter, make sure they're getting Facebook, make sure they're getting the Everbridge alerts. We can use a QR code. We can ask local businesses to maybe share that for residents that come in, with this Stay Informed type of message to basically get the message out to all our residents that here is a communications channel for you to be aware of. And a couple other points on there that, maybe listening to Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, if they want to do public service to kind of spread that message. Partner with the fire department in their fund drive, maybe we can put a flyer in saying, hey, this is something available to you.
I also understand that the technology has the capacity to automatically populate social media or other website so that the staff doesn't have to do all of those things separately.
Different social media platforms?
I don't remember, I remember Samantha talking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
she
why I was
said-
confused.
yeah.
I don't know what Everbridge is, and I forget the name of it, but there was one platform. Was it Everbridge where you had the capacity for it to go out Instagram, Twitter? Right.
Everbridge.
Okay, so I'm aware it does email, voice, text.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of social media. I don't know.
either.
We can
That's what
ask.
Samantha.
But we do
Also-
have, Simplified is a third-party vendor for social media that offers nonprofits and government associations a free account. So we have a free account there. Currently, police department's using it for Facebook, but we could Instagram, Twitter, do all those other things, and that would be that one, you post one message and it goes across all those platforms. I don't know, we can see if there's a connection to Everbridge.
It's my understanding when you sign up for Everbridge, you have the option of explaining, choosing how you'd like to do
That's
it.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's what she was
That's right.
telling
Yeah.
us about.
Yeah, so John, is it something that, in coordination with the staff and the mayor and the police advisory committee, that it could be a 2024 project to kind of tighten this up a bit so that we have the fullest possible reach? I mean, that's really the goal, right? We want all residents to be alerted.
Sure.
I think we have a good number of who we have signed up on Everbridge now. I think maybe starting with the website, internal things, starting with the website, maybe post something in the newsletter and try to get a QR code that we can share, and then maybe revisit in 6 months and see what time, like hopefully we've seen, a large increase in Everbridge signups, and maybe go from there.
One of the things that I just wanted to jump in for this, I think all of this is great. I've neglected to start this by saying, and I'll just hit pause a second, I appreciate the committee that you put together. We've got a lot of resources on Police Advisory Committee, and it's really a wonderful composition of people coming with different skill sets. So we're certainly happy to, work with you to figure out how is the best way to roll this out. One of the points that we were really concerned about, though, is if we only rely on text-based and internet-based communication systems, because some of who we're looking to target are most vulnerable, are elderly, which who may not be as online as some of the rest of us. So as we're developing, or who may have their phone docked in the middle of the night if there's some sort of an emergency like a house fire. So I do encourage us to think more broadly. I think that moving forward with how many people can we get signed up, how can we use this system is a great starting place, but I don't think it should be our ending place.
Okay. So I'm aware of the time, so I think we need to move to the next item, but I do want to thank you, Rebecca, for your work with the committee, and it sounds like over the next 6 months, ideally before the next summer season, when we may face, more climate challenges, we could have some sort of, we could have some of this worked out. Yeah. And it also does, I also just so appreciate that you're also the emergency management coordinator.
Yes.
It really just fits together so well.
And I appreciate you saying social media, non-borough run social media pages are not a helpful place or space to have these important conversations because it's rife with such misinformation, and we really need to control that message.
Okay, so the next item is 7, the EV Charge Point Pilot Program Policy Draft that we have as a draft, and we will not finalize this draft in this meeting, but it's an initial conversation. It's in response to public comment that we've been hearing, asking for kind of guardrails around this project, parameters that can be transparent and understood. And this is an initial draft that seeks to justify the program, explain why council endorsed it, but also, as the draft is developed, respond to the questions that have been posed to us by the community. So, to review, the questions that we have been asked are, how will the project be monitored in terms of efficiency? Who will be the lead contact person in case of an emergency, or an equipment failure? What are the metrics that can be used to measure the efficacy of any one given site? How long will the program run? It is officially a pilot under the PICO program. Are there additional considerations for bus stops that may be nearby? And if a location is deemed ineffective because of the criteria established through the policy, what would be the process for moving it? These are the questions that have come to us directly. And so that is what the idea of this policy would be to answer those questions. And this is just the beginning of that. But I thought we could just have a very brief discussion about the contact person with our chief, and how could you imagine, if a resident was concerned, especially a resident who lives in, right next to a charging station, at say any hour, maybe early in the morning, there's some concern they have, some sort of safety concern. What do you think would be the best way?
911, for sure, because depending on the nature, if it's a, suspicion of potential criminal activity, we've heard those concerns. Obviously, that would get a police officer there as fast as possible. If it is a safety concern dealing with, the charging station itself or whatever, we can at least get somebody there to notify PICO and get them, the fastest response we're gonna get through PICO is from the county hotline, so the county dispatcher calling them and letting them know. So I think that no matter, on either end there, 911 is gonna be a resource.
Okay, so either if it's, you know, a resident is concerned that there's someone sitting in the car that could present a danger, or that there's actually an equipment failure of some kind. In either case, 911.
A failure, I think that maybe we need to develop something internally, I don't know. Maybe we discuss that. I would say an emergency, like if we are concerned, like say there's a strange noise or you see sparks or, you know, we did have one where it looks like something kind of backed into the post or something. Anything of that nature, definitely 911, because we want to make sure that it's safe and secure before we, you know, make any other plans. But if it's an outage, let's say, maybe that's something we develop a plan for.
Okay. All right, so
equipment failures, just contact the borough directly.
Okay.
And, you know, we're responsible for maintaining them, so if it's something that's not an emergency, we'll have Public Works go out and take a look at it, and then we can contact the provider to have it serviced, you know, if need be. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that'll be something that I think we can add to this draft. And then we'll need to add more to respond to these other questions. So this will be a project, I think, that'll stretch into 2024, into the next couple of months for this committee. And we take this just as a starting point.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you're all okay with it, including you, John, that maybe you and I could even put together a little executive summary. You know, my day job is as a criminologist. There are no data to suggest that EV chargers attract people coming in to do harm. In fact, I think you'd probably appreciate if someone who was going to commit a crime entered their credit card and logged into an app. Because most folks who want to commit a crime don't digitally register themselves in the point of place before doing so. So it might be helpful for us to put together a little executive summary on the data or lack thereof with EV chargers.
Okay, absolutely.
If you want.
Yeah.
Now, a point on the efficacy and the metrics, you know, and this again is responding to one of the specific questions. Now that we have data reported, included in the packet from Flow, right? Flow keeps track of every single charging session. And so included in our packet, we have the full record for the calendar year of 2023. And we can see that we have, I think, over 1,360 charging sessions over the course of 2023, which demonstrates, you know, significant interest in using this critical technology. Now, one thing I just want us to note is that there was some confusion when Flow initially commissioned these stations and how they were named, and some of the names changed with the serial numbers, and you know, so for example, Metropolitan Hall, which is on North Essex, was renamed to North Essex Curbside. And so I think it would be we might ask the EAC to do some study of the data that's coming from Flow so that we can assess, this was kind of the equity concern that was brought up in public comment, so that we can assess to what extent we're seeing usage on the south side, the north side, the different stations. But we just have to be careful because of, yeah, some of the labeling was off when we originally started. But the serial numbers are always correct. So we can always use that.
And the usage data are not going to be completely accurate because there are cars parked there very often that are not being charged.
Right.
So to the question of one of the public is, I think we need to regularly enforce the fact that they're not being.
That's right. And also the other factor to remember is that many of the stations were not actually turned on until July. So, you know, we're not getting the full picture even with this data set, you know, of the possible usage. And of course, the usage is expected to increase significantly because the stations incentivize families to make the transition. So I would expect that the 2024 numbers could be even double what we're
I think
seeing.
it could be triple, actually, to be honest with you. Yeah.
You know, and of course, the Marion Station hasn't been activated. You know, so all of these considerations, as we see more enforcement around the station, you know, parking only for EV charging, we'll see more usage.
Yeah, well, I don't remember what month it was, but to your question, I think we looked back, and it might have been September, we had like 26 parking violations that were issued for non-EV chargers, so it is being enforced.
Okay, good.
I was going to say our parking enforcement officer is charged with units that are up and running. He is charged with giving citations to anybody inappropriately parked there.
And can we delineate that so we know how many citations are in EV? Are we able to do that?
Yeah, if you want to know push report, I can do it monthly.
Yeah, that might be helpful for us. Thanks.
Yeah.
And in terms of the data, I think it would also be meaningful, like, it would be useful for the committee to be able to look at data in a more meaningful way. So total number of charging hours,
Yes.
number of unique users,
Yes.
system, like the percentage of hours that the system is being used, that kind of thing. So that would help the understanding of how it's being used.
Yeah, I agree, and if we could ask the EAC to consider analyzing this data in a way that would be useful to inform the very policy that we've just been discussing.
Yep. I can actually take all the data, like, I can get anything in Excel, so I can take all these like Excel sheets and give them to you and say, have at it.
I can do that.
Yeah.
I would also love to see a calculation of the tons of carbon.
We can do that too.
That, you know, this represents as an offset.
Yep.
You want to be asking him to join the EAC?
That might be.
All right, so the work on the policy will continue. It's just beginning now and will continue in January and February in this committee. Okay, so the next item, I know we're already over time. Very briefly, could we just ask Alan or Matt to speak to the future project as an update?
Yeah, so we were talking about the rental inspection program earlier. There was a draft ordinance that was completed. I think it was just put on hold because we wanted to internally figure out when this could realistically be implemented. So we're thinking that it could be probably implemented in 2024. We would just have to hammer out some dates and talk with code enforcement, obviously, because it's going to increase our workload with them. So we'll come back with what we think is appropriate, and we'll bring forward the draft ordinance back to public health and safety, and then if it's approved, go to council for approval. The mobile food vendor regulations, we didn't actually draft an ordinance, but we had looked at other municipal ordinances, and we kind of had an idea of what we wanted for Narberth. So again, we'll touch base again on that in the new year, and then we would have to ask, obviously John Walker to draft an ordinance that would fit Narberth based on our feedback. I can go back through my notes and see where we let that last. I think we discussed it in the summer. But yeah, once the new year starts, these are two projects that will definitely, they'll be on our radar for getting implemented next year.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Alan. And my conversation with Kevin Walsh, our inspector, he made very clear that he has additional help now as well. So there is increased capacity that I think makes this a realistic goal in 2024. It's something the borough has wanted for a long time. And I'd love to see it really happen next year.
Okay.
All right, so I think that's all we have time for, so we will adjourn.
Before we adjourn, can we just acknowledge this is your last public health and safety meeting, and I just want to comment that your leadership on Borough Council has truly had an impact on generations of North. I could cry because you've made our kids and our community healthier. We are healthier and greener because of you, Rob, largely single-handedly because of your tireless efforts with environmental concerns. The EAC and the PAC are two examples of how you have very strategically developed structural arms of the council to allow us to make evidence-based decisions and something that will be here to protect our kids for generations. Your passion and work has taught me so much. I did not come in an environmentalist. Tom is the environmentalist in our household. And you taught me the urgency of climate change, and I'm really proud of where you've positioned us, and I will really miss you.
Thank you, Cindy, it really means a lot.
I would ask for a round of applause for him.
Yes.
Well, it really is a team effort, and I have to credit my wife Miriam, who is the real environmentalist. And maybe it was for the sake of our marriage that I started, take this more seriously years ago. But then once I really was, reading about it, it became something that was keeping me up at night, and that's when I joined the council. So, and it's been such a partnership, including from the beginning when Cindy said, let's ban plastic bags. That was you. And so it's been a real partnership, and I'm grateful to be part of it. So thank you.
Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Okay.